G'day and welcome back to RC Model Reviews. Some D-Series FrSky receivers. Now, you know I'm not happy with FrSky. I've already mentioned that in the past, but I do use FrSky. A lot of FrSky stuff, and the FrSky D and V-Series protocols were really good. I say were because, well, FrSky's moved on. They moved on to the X-Series, and now they've moved on to Access. So they've left a lot of us behind, but here's some examples of what we used to get. Originally there was the D8R. This was a really good receiver. Telemetry. It had a couple of analog inputs on the side. Had really good range. It was just, I think these were just PWM. They didn't have S-Bus or anything like that. But they were a good, solid, reliable receiver. I used a lot of these. Worked really well. Then, of course, they came out with the version 2 series with the V2s and the D2s. And this is the version 2 of the same thing. It's the D8R2, I think it is. I don't know. Anyway, again, analog inputs on the side, and this one doesn't have S-Bus either. It's pretty old school. But then, of course, we got other stuff. We got the D6FR. It's also a telemetry receiver. And eventually they started coming out with PPM outputs for flight controllers. And finally, S-Bus. Now, what I'm reviewing today is none of those. It's this. And this is the Motiv RC R8SB. And it is a 2.4 gigs, 8-channel D8-compatible receiver. Double way. Woohoo. Great. I wanted to get twice the curds as well. Dairy joke there. And of course it's made in China, like everything in the world is today. But the reason I decided to have a look at this is because I'm looking, now that I've got the jumper transmitter, I can probably win myself right off FrSky for future builds, because the jumper has turned out to be an excellent transmitter, which has FrSky. It's compatible with all my old FrSky receivers. And now with this third-party FrSky receivers, now FrSky said, oh, we're bringing access in because we don't want people being fooled by fake receivers that don't provide the performance. Well, as I've said before, I can tell you I've got a bunch of FrSky receivers here, genuine FrSky receivers that just do not perform. 100 meters range from an XS4R, one of these things here. Bought several of these and they're just useless. 100 meters, useless. Must have been a bad batch, but I don't get my money back. That's not going to work. So if I can get away from FrSky receivers, now that I've got away from FrSky transmitters for my new builds, hey ho, that should be good. So let's have a look at this thing. Let's see if it lives up to the hype. Okay, no surprises. The instructions are photocopied. Actually, they're not bad instructions compared to the stuff that came with the original FrSky stuff. It doesn't make any pretense to be a FrSky product. It's not trying to masquerade. It's not a counterfeit. It is a compatible. And just it talks you through linking, specifications. What does it say? Range above 1.2 kilometers. Well, you know, I'd expect more than 1.2. Typically out of one of these D-Series receivers, I'm quite easily able to get 2 kilometers. So hopefully this will do the equivalent of the real FrSky D-Series. And it's got output, mode 1, mode 2, mode 3. Yeah, it's all kind of irrelevant. There you go. Shows you how to connect it up to a flight controller, to an F7 flight controller. That's handy. And remember, this does, whoops, let me put this does have S-Bus and PWM. Now, PPM. PPM is pretty last century, but PWM, that's the separate servo outputs, that's useful, and S-Bus is also very useful for flight controller work. PPM, which is the serial sequence of channels at PWM speeds, is kind of old school. This has had a bit of a squish in the mail. See, that's got the thin sort of acetate case, the thin plastic case, not really going to be physically designed like the old ones, except maybe these were the same. These had that same kind of cheapy plasticky thing. I mean, it's lightweight, it serves a purpose, stops the thing shorting out against something. So yeah, won't hold anything against it. It's similar to FrSky in that regard. One thing to note, there is nothing to stop you accidentally plugging your servos in one row of pins over and fritzing them. So be very careful when you plug your servos in if you use the PWM outputs. Right, it even has mentioned of how to set up Betaflight. I mean, hey, that's pretty good. It's a generation ahead of the old FrSky ones. Then we move on, up here too. Mentions Betaflight. Tyrannus, so you get 3 pages of documentation. That's not too bad. I'm going to check that out shortly and see if the documentation is accurate, because, of course, as we all know, sometimes it's not. Let's take a close-up look at this baby. It is, as I say, it's got that little cheapy plastic casey thing. There's just a little fail-safe button or light or something on the side. I don't know. I'll read the instructions and then I'll be able to tell you. Gaily coloured, or I can't say gaily, brightly coloured connectors along the side. Isn't that pretty? And on this side it tells you which is signal, which is power, which way to put your stuff. micro UFL connectors on there, so that's typical of this type of construction. I think we'll lift its skirt and have a look and see how well it's made, shall we? Right, so here's what we get inside this little beastie. This is the RF side of the board, and looking at it, we can see we've got a front end chip here, which is quite normal, little preamp, and I think also antenna switching. And here's our RF goodness. This is the chip that does all the 2.4 stuff. And if I turn it over, we've got the processor on the back there that then takes all the stuff, sorts it out into digital streams and throws that out on these pins. So that looks pretty stock standard. If we want to compare that to the FrSky, in this case the 6-channel receiver, you can see there's a lot more in the FrSky receiver. Now admittedly there's nothing on the back of this one, but we do have extra chips in the RF stream on the FrSky receiver. So let's take a little look at that. We've got, here's our antennas, here is the same chip I think as we've got there, but then we've got something else extra in here, and there is the RF goodness chip there, I think, and there's our processor on the FrSky. So that's the board chip that's on the bottom of this one. That's the equivalent functionality. So there's a little bit more. There's a lot more passives. There's these capacitors and resistors. A lot more passives in this one than there is in that one. And I wonder if that's just that these are people have taken a more advanced design, or whether they're just shortchanging us. We will find out when we test it, won't we? We'll do some range testing and some flight testing and see how it works out. Interesting points to note with the Motive RC one is that the analog input will directly accept up to 4 cells, I think. I'll look at the specs and that will tell me. But that means you don't have to use one of those little resistive divider things that you have with the traditional FrSky D-Series receiver. You had to buy a little $3 resistor network so you could plug it across your batteries. It says here, it actually go to 6 cells. It says 2 analog telemetry ports, A1 and A2. A1's for the internal receiver battery voltage sensor, which is pretty useless because that's driven by a beacon. It's always going to be 5 volts unless your battery's flat. And voltage sensor A2 for external battery, which is 0 to 30 volts or 1 to 6S. So you can slap your LiPo voltage straight into the analog port, and then your telemetry will tell you what your battery voltage is. And that's really the key thing on a lot of models, especially if you're flying line of sight. You just want to know when your battery's getting flat. So hey ho, that's a nice feature. As I say, on the other ones you had to have an external resistive divider, and that was just extra money, extra complexity, extra cost, something else to go wrong. But here we go, that's what you get inside it. Let's put the skirt back on it, stick it in the model. Okay, yeah, this little plastic case is really crappy. It's so cheap. I'd probably just wrap it in heat shrink, but we'll test it as it came because it doesn't go back together very well. The plastic bends and tears, and it's pretty useless actually. The other thing worth noting on this is that this will actually run from 13 volts. So if you've got a 3-cell pack, you can just wire this baby straight up to the LiPo, which is kind of good. But remember that voltage will go through to your servo. So if you're plugging servos in, not a good idea. However, if you were just connecting it to a flight controller, you could run the whole thing without having to put it through a BEC. But most flight controllers feed data back through the S-bus connection to drive the receiver anyway. So that 13-volt receiver capability, it may be useful sometime, but I don't think it's really a particularly big selling feature. So there we go, the jury's in. I've done a range test. I've range tested this against a D-Series FrSky receiver, a genuine FrSky D-Series, and the range is identical. On the low power setting, on the range test setting, I got 50 paces with my jumper, and I got 65 paces with the Tyrannus. And you might think, ooh, hang on, the Tyrannus has more range. Well, this is the low power range test setting. It may be that the low power level is lower on this than on that. I don't know. I haven't actually measured it. I will do that in a future video just to make sure. And also I'll be doing some in-air range testing when the weather sorts itself out. In fact, it's so windy out there today that with the model on the ground, range testing, it got blown away by the wind. It was just sitting there, and it was a Nano Talon. So it was just sitting right on the ground, and the wind blew it and tumbled several times. So it's really, really windy. But yeah, the takeaway from all this is that this receiver, it seems to be every bit as good as a genuine FrSky receiver. Perhaps better. We won't know until we get it in the air. And the other thing is that I've noticed I really do need to check. Now, I've got, sort of just anecdotally, I felt that I've had more range with the jumper than with my Tyrannus when I've been flying models and getting RSSI warnings. But that just depends on the setting of the RSSI warnings and so forth. So I'm going to do some genuine range tests. I've got my long range set up. I'm going to see how far I fly before the signal drops out on the T16. I'm going to see how far I fly before the signal drops out on my original Tyrannus and on the QX 7S. So we'll see which actually gives you most range in the air. Suffice to say, both of them are going to have more than enough range for visual line of sight with this receiver or a genuine FrSky. But that's a future video coming up. I'll compare power levels and we'll do a little bit of technical looking behind the scenes. We'll lift the skirts on this and see what happens. But as far as this receiver goes, on the bench it looks good. Range testing it looks good. I haven't found any reasons not to like it. The price is good. Certainly, I think they're on special. They're on a flash deal. They might even still be on a flash deal. If they are, gobble them up because they're, yeah, I'm going to buy a whole lot more because I have a lot of models which I want. I want the convenience of being able to plug my servo straight to the receiver, not using a flight controller. A lot of the new receivers are S-bus, and that's fine if you're using a flight controller, but I've still got a lot of fixed wing models that I want to fly manually. I want to fly them around the sky. I've got, even the sub 250, I really like flying the little sub 250 without a flight controller in the way because I don't need it if I'm just doing local, proximity flying. So that's one thing I haven't checked. How much does it weigh? The bulky little beast. It could be heavy. It could take us over the limit with the sub 250. Better check. I have a feeling it's probably going to be about 4 grams, but my estimations of weight are terrible. So let's put it on the scales that don't show the blood, and we'll see what the reality is. Yeah, I told you I'm miles out. 7 grams, so it isn't light. If you took the plastic coating off, covering off, you'd probably save a gram or two. You'd be down to 5 or 6 grams. So, hey, that's fine. If you wanted to save even more weight, you'd just shorten up the antennas a bit and then bear back that same amount of wire. You'd save another half or third of a gram or something, but who cares? 7 grams, it's not a lot of weight unless you're really close to the line with your sub 250 build. There you go. This is a recommended buy. It seems to work just fine and dandy. I will be doing follow-ups though and showing you if there's any issues. Speaking of if there's any issues, I have had an issue with my SkyZone my SkyZone OLED goggles. Yes, the DVR stopped working. It just keeps putting a red SD card up when I try and record. Something's gone wrong. So I'll be pulling that apart and having a look. If you want to see that video, let me know. I'll make a video of pulling it apart. We'll see what the build quality's like. It's a bit disappointing when something that's so good has a problem. But hey, could just be a wire. We'll find out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Recommended buy. There are links in the description. They are not my affiliate links. They are the links. Have to disclose. Banggood sent me this to review, and I've done it. They sent me some links to put in the description. I'll put those links in. I don't make a bean. If you don't buy these, it won't hurt me. But if you're looking for an alternative to FrSky that uses the D8 protocol, pretty damn good. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye for now.